This is going to be a very interesting session related to chemsex. We have very good speakers. And may I introduce David Stewart, who is a very relevant person related to the knowledge of chemsex. He works in Dean Street Clinic in London, and he has a huge experience related to this topic. And I'm sure it's going to be an excellent presentation, and we'll have time to debate afterwards. I think it's going to be very informative. The second speaker is Diego Garcia. He's a very dear friend. You all know him very well. He's an activist. He has been for many years, and he's involved in many activities, activists related to the treatment of HIV, hepatitis. He's been the member of the committee, and he has a lot of experience. He's going to contribute a great deal. So we're going to start. We have 30 minutes per speaker, and then we will talk about both topics. So thank you very much. Hola.
Yeah, I'm very clever. I work at 5016 Street, and I learned how to press buttons today. 5016 Street is it's a sexual health and HIV clinic in the center of London, and we have lots of very high-risk people coming there. Chemsex, we're getting better with every minute. Chemsex was a word I invented about 17 years ago. I felt a particular need to identify a problem that was not just sex using drugs or alcohol by any population. I felt like there was something very specific happening to my community. And it wasn't just sex and drugs, using drugs and alcohol. It was something more complex. And I needed to identify it differently, and chemsex was the word I came up with. And I think perhaps I usually start these sessions by trying to define what I meant by that word, even though people have my blessing to redefine it as they choose in whatever setting they choose. They get my permission first. No, I joke. For me, it was, many people use different drugs for different reasons. And I think a person who uses heroin or crack cocaine, they don't do those drugs to go out and have a laugh. They don't do heroin and crack cocaine to have a good time or to find great sex or to have a dance. Those drugs serve very specific purposes. And they're usually about nursing trauma, some historical pain or some self-loathing. Sometimes it's associated with poverty or homelessness and crime. It's not about having a great time. And where I come from in England, and it seems pretty common, when gay communities haven't preferred heroin and crack cocaine in very large numbers. We've always preferred the party drugs, things like cocaine and ecstasy and MDMA, and there's probably been a reason for that, and I can only guess, but from my experience, it's about the reasons we use drugs in the first place. I think many gay men felt like the only gay in the family, maybe the only gay at school, probably not the only gay at school, but they maybe thought they were, and maybe the only gay in the village. And that's a very lonely kind of experience, I think. It's an isolating experience. And heroin and crack cocaine, it's not about communing or having fun. Those drugs are about isolating a little. If you picture the heroin user, the stereotype, he or she may be alone, perhaps with a needle in their arm, perhaps not, but usually alone and feeling safe. Some people describe the heroin high as being wrapped in a warm blanket or returning to the mother's womb. It's feeling very safe. It's not dancing or socializing or chatting or at dinner parties. It's something very isolating. And I think gay men looking for a drug to solve a problem are not going to use a drug that's going to isolate them further. they're probably going to prefer drugs that are about connection and community and fitting in and communication, party drugs. So if you picture the stereotype again of the gay man, it's a man with his shirt off, dancing, probably on ecstasy, in his community, having a good time, feeling safe and feeling connected, not isolated at all, quite the opposite. And that might explain why gay men have chosen those drugs rather than things like crack and heroin, in large numbers at least. But something was changing because these drugs were never very problematic. In the 1980s and the 1990s and the early 2000s, when ecstasy and cocaine and MDMA were the most popular drugs by gay men, they were difficult times, of course, but we didn't see lots of gay men rushing to emergency departments with overdoses from their ecstasy or MDMA. We didn't see lots of gay men rushing to emergency departments with drug-induced psychosis or withdrawal symptoms. We didn't see lots of gay men rushing to accident emergency departments with violence associated with their ecstasy use. We didn't see lots of gay men rushing to drug services or substance misuse services for needles to inject their ecstasy or MDMA. We didn't see lots of gay men rushing to drug services with addiction problems. And although we always, wherever we see gay men, we see lots of sexually transmitted infections, but we didn't see a particular rise in sexually transmitted infections or HIV, particularly attributable to those drugs. But something was changing, and I'm talking about the early 2000s, I think. A few things were changing. Let me say, to make it simple, 3 things were changing. First of all, HIV care was getting better. It was getting better. We were living longer. The medicines were working. It was very simple and it was great. But the HIV prevention messages we were delivering to our populations, to our communities, to our patients, were more complicated. We wanted them to understand condoms and negotiation of serosorting, for instance. We wanted them to understand how HIV is transmitted. We wanted them to understand condoms. We wanted them to understand PEP and the window required for PEP. We wanted them also to understand what an undetectable viral load means and what uninfectious means. We also want them now to understand what PrEP means, and that's really complicated. Does anybody remember, you will remember, Richard, the magazine Vanity Fair cover with Elizabeth Taylor holding the condom? It was such a beautiful kind of message. It was a condom solves all your problems with HIV. If you wear a condom, you will not catch HIV. If you wear a condom, you cannot transmit HIV. It was so simple. But HIV prevention was getting more complicated with PEP and condoms and undetectable viral loads and PEP windows, and that's a lot of stuff to take to bed with you. And we were telling our gay communities, our patients and our brothers, we were telling them to equip themselves with all of this information before going to bed, and expecting them, or hoping that they would assimilate it all. And not only that, but we were asking them to not only understand the biomedical stuff, but to understand and have the communication skills and the trust in the bedroom and in that situation of being particularly aroused. We're asking them to have all of the communications. If someone says they're undetectable, do you trust them, even though if you met them a short time ago? We're asking gay men to take so much into the bedroom. I think drugs would make it a lot easier, personally. I'd rather just get high and not think about it, to be honest. And that's what a lot of my gay brothers did, actually. But that's just one thing, HIV prevention getting more complicated. Another thing that was changing dramatically, and I'm talking about a real cultural revolution, was technology was changing. Almost overnight. We went from cruising areas and saunas and bars and clubs and public toilets to smartphones. It was a very fast technological and sexual revolution, almost overnight. We were asked, I have already apologized for not speaking Spanish to you today. You've been very kind, allowing me to speak English, but English is actually not my first language. The first language I learned from the moment I came out of my mother's womb, I looked up at her face, at her facial expressions. I needed to know that I was safe. I needed to know where there was danger. I needed to know to be fed. I needed to learn trust and love, and all these things were integral to my survival. And the language I learned was the expressions on her face and the people around me. They were the first language I learned, and I continued to use those as an adult throughout my sex life. Hooking up in a sauna cubicle, hooking up in a cruising area or in a public toilet or in a bedroom or in a bar, I used that language of facial expressions and facial recognition enormously. It helped me go into the bedroom to navigate all those complicated things I needed to, like HIV prevention and STI prevention. But overnight, me and my gay brothers all around the world were asked to understand their sexual and emotional needs and communicate them to someone else using an emoji. And 140 characters, no exaggerations, and a photoshopped image of their abdominals. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but actually I'm not. It was an overnight change for how we communicate, hook up, and how the role sex plays in our lives. Overnight, and it didn't come with any instruction booklet. It didn't come with how to have sex in an epidemic. It wasn't how to have sex in a technological revolution or how to have sex in a chemsex epidemic. No, it just landed in our laps. If there were instructions, I would have liked Richard Berkowitz to have written them. If there were instructions, I would have liked them to say, hello gay men, here is your new technology. You will need to have a good understanding of your sexual and emotional needs moving forward. You will need to understand how to communicate them using a limited number of characters, because you will find yourselves with your GPS in someone's bedroom, a complete stranger, with no facial recognition or bonding having been done, naked and trying to have one of the most intimate experiences that two human beings can have. And here are the instructions to help you do that. Here is how you write your profile. Here is how you understand your sexual and emotional needs. Reflect on what you like about sex and don't want. You will experience rejections. Not everyone on here is kind. And here is how you are robust to handle. I will stop. There were no instructions. It just landed on us. And it was an overnight revolution, very difficult, that made, well, it's easier just to take drugs and let it happen. I know. The third thing, I talked about HIV prevention changing and technology completely revolutioning our lives. The third thing was new drugs. Not entirely new, but for a long time, ecstasy and cocaine and MDMA had been the drugs we used. During that traumatic epidemic of the 80s and the 90s, when we found dance floors where we communed, where we danced, where we escaped, ecstasy and cocaine and MDMA, they helped us to do it. We adopted those drugs, we accepted them, they helped us. We normalized them. But overnight, those drugs disappeared and they became crystal methamphetamine. They became methadone in some parts of the world. They became GHB, GBL in some parts of the world. And these drugs were not recreational drugs. These drugs are difficult, problematic drugs. Once again, I would like them to have come with an instruction booklet that said, hello gay men, welcome to the 2000s. Say goodbye to the drugs that have served their purpose for you for a few decades and say hello to these dangerous ones. You will need a much more complicated skill set to play with these safely, but you will like them. They are designed for sex, we know you like it. So here is it. Sorry, no, there was no instruction booklet. We had to make that up as we go along as well. But overnight, when I say overnight, let me give you an example in regard to drug availability epidemiology. So I am in lovely Madrid. If my sister was to come from Australia, where I'm from, to lovely Madrid, if I was going to be concerned about her developing a drug problem, she would have to get off the plane, if I'm thinking of the trajectory, she would get off the plane, find somewhere to live, call me to say hello, find a job, develop a real network of friends and a social life, and maybe a few months in, someone may offer her drugs that are typical for her population, her demographic, maybe heroin perhaps, maybe ecstasy or something. Maybe she likes it, I don't know. She had the same childhood as me, so I think she might like it. Maybe 2 or 3 months later, she will try the drug again. Maybe another month later, she'll try the drug again. Maybe a month later, she'll be introduced to a drug dealer. And then the problem might start developing. That, from the time she gets off the plane to the time a drug problem is forming, there is a few months there. If my younger gay brother was to come to Madrid, he would get off the plane, he would log on to Grindr, and he would be offered drugs perhaps the same day, certainly within the same week. Very problematic drugs, without an instruction booklet. And this is the fastest introduction to any population on the planet of dangerous new drugs en masse that we have ever seen before in the history of drug epidemiology, the delivery of drugs to populations. It's the fastest overnight delivery on technological level en masse to a large number of people that had already adopted drugs as normal within some parts of the community with no instruction booklet. At the end, it's those three factors, I think, if we're really trying to simplify what chemsex is, that forced me to try to define chemsex as something unique that was happening to my gay brothers, not just in London, but seemingly around the world as I travel. This was not just sex and drugs. And it's really important. I know there are some excellent people in the audience who study pharmacology and psychiatry. I need you to forget what the drugs look like under a microscope for a moment. Diego, if you and I are going to do ecstasy together, this is how it's going to look. Oh my God, we're both going to like each other so much. We are going to share our whole life story with each other. We are going to feel so connected. I want you to have the best time. It's really important to me. I want you to be safe and well. I don't want to harm you in any way. I have no interest in anything else. Your life story is fascinating to me. Hours and hours, we will kiss. And when we learn that we both like that same Madonna song, oh my God. That's what sex on ecstasy looks like. We might dance a little bit too, if we can have a break from the kissing. Yeah, and I will lend you my favorite pair of sunglasses in the morning because the sun is so bright. Even if I never see you again, I don't care. That's as dangerous as it gets, really. If you and I are going to do heroin together, I'm sorry, I forgot you were there. I'm not interested in sex. I'm very nice that I'm not isolated completely alone in this experience. If you're over there and enjoying your heroin and me over here, that's okay. That's what sex on heroin looks like. If you and I are going to do crystal meth together, oh my God, nothing on the planet will release as much dopamine into our brains. We'll be so stimulated that I might have forgot, everything about you is turning me on. I am absolutely stimulated by you. I feel invulnerable to harm. I need more, I need more, I need more. This is amazing. It's the best sex I've ever had. It's the most disinhibiting thing I have ever felt. I hope you feel the same way too, but really I feel like this, me. Let's do some more, let's do it some more. Oh my God, 3 hours have passed already. We need more stimulation. Who else can we get? Do you like this person? We get them too. More drugs, more drugs. Did I lose my attention for what I was doing? I don't care how dangerous it is. It's so sexy. Let's do more, let's do more. Oh my gosh, has 24 hours passed? We need more drugs, we need more. I need more stimulation. I need more stimulation. This is not satisfying enough. More drugs, more people, more risk. Nothing can hurt me now. I'm in a bubble of absolute escapism, and I need more. Danger means nothing to me. Risk means nothing to me. I don't care what those 3 drugs look like under the microscope. Understanding how the drugs contribute to our disinhibition, to our behavior, and to our risk-taking abilities, that's what really defines chemsex as the use of some particular drugs at a particular period in history, by a particular population, at a particular time, again, in HIV history, at a particular time in a technological revolution. And that's what chemsex is. And it's controversial, it's real. I've visited many cities as I travel the world and get invited to amazing places to understand chemsex in different cities. It's always the same. I'll go to a doctor's centre, an HIV doctor's centre, infectious diseases unit, and they say, we are so lucky in this city, crystal meth or chemsex has not really happened here yet. I say, that's nice to hear. And then I go to the gay men's charity, and they say, yes, we've seen some small signs. It's not like England, but yes, we've seen some small signs. We keep an eye on it. And I say, this is very helpful, thank you. And then I show a film. I go to a film screening or a community event around Pride and ask people in an audience such as this, has chemsex affected you, your friendships, your lives, or is it something you need to negotiate when you are hooking up online? And it's 99% of the audience every time in every city around the world. And I have to go back and put those pieces together of what the gay community is telling me, from what the charities are telling me, from what the doctors and medical teams are telling me, to try to make sense of this. In any sense, what I want to do with my last 10 minutes really is introduce you to something you can do. I don't want to terrify you with my drama interpretation of chemsex and then like catch my plane. I want to give you something you can use. There is some extraordinary chemsex support in Madrid. There is some extraordinary chemsex support in Barcelona. There is many cities in the world where there is no support, or where the support is still struggling and still learning. I think what I'm trying to say is every one of you, I haven't met all of you today, but every one of you might have a gay man or a trans person in front of you within the next month or 3 months or year who says, yes, I do chemsex. I came to be working at 50 16th Street because I went there in 2010 and they told me that about maybe 5, 10%, maybe even 15% of their presentations for sexually transmitted infections or for PEP were possibly related to chems or to chemsex. And I thought this was alarming. I popped in the 3 days after this to the PEP clinic, and I asked the doctors and nurses to ask questions differently. Not, are you an injecting drug user, have you used illicit drugs? Which were the standard questions. I asked them to ask, do you use party drugs for sex? With a big smile on their face. What's your favorite one? And are you having a good time? The doctors and nurses said, ooh, we can't ask these questions. It's a little like we are condoning drug use, no? I just explained, no, the way we ask questions encourages people to answer more honestly or disclose more honestly their responses. So 33 gay men came for PEP on this day. And every single one was asked these 3 questions, and every single one on this day after Easter had said that they came from some version of a chemsex environment. 3 days earlier, they had thought maybe 10, 15% would be a guess. It was 100%. That was when I got a full-time job there, yay, but where we really developed our services to be culturally competent. What I want to do is give you a tool. If somebody in front of you is asked, do you use party drugs for sex? What's your favorite one? Are you having a good time? And they go, yes. I wasn't going to tell you, but since you asked me the questions the right way, I will tell you the truth. Yes, and I want help. And you go, oh, what do I do? So, where are my slides? I get them. Excuse me a moment. So I'm going to give you a tool. Does that say slideshow? Is this the one I press? This one? Okay. So imagine, thank you. I'm amazing. So imagine that you have asked a person sitting in front of you, do you use party drugs for sex? What's your favorite one? Are you having a good time? And they say, yes. Yes, help me. And you go, goodness me, there is no chemsex support in my city. You say, I don't know much about chemsex. I might not even be a gay man. So I might say everything wrong. But if we go and do this tool together online, perhaps we can find a solution for you. Really, it's about clicking some buttons. First page that comes up will be choose a goal. And it might be abstinence. That's not a very common choice, I should tell you. But it's a choice that some of our patients say, and that really just, the next page will just explain that this is a big goal to choose from. It's a change of life that is being represented. And there are some tools and tips that explain this, including some links to how to find 12-step support groups within their city and some videos to help. But ultimately, it will invite them to take a smaller goal, something to work towards it more gently, because it's just a very big goal that represents a huge change of life. It's quite a lot of help needed. Another thing they might request is harm reduction information. So they might say, I don't want to stop using drugs, I'm loving it, I'm having a good time, but they might be open for you suggesting how they can be safer. Safer in regard to sex, safer in regard to drugs, safer in regard to app use, like Grindr use, and safer in regard to the chemsex environment they are playing in. Another choice they might choose might be, they often say, I don't know what I want. You know, I'm not ready to commit to abstinence, and I don't know what I want. I just know I'm starting to think about it. This would take them to a series of questions. It's reflective questions to help them reflect on the role sex plays in their life and what they want from their sex life, and what makes good sex, what makes bad sex, and the role chems might be playing in that. Questions about, it might ask about the percentage of, what percentage of your sex life is on drugs, and what percentage of your sex life is sober, and what would you prefer it to be? So it's classic motivational interviewing style questions that help a person who is frightened to make changes, reflecting on the role chems are playing in their life. It can just help them, guide them through the denial or the fear or the ambivalence that might be associated with it, so they can be clear about how they want to move forward. And it's something you could send the link to their home so they could do it in their own time. It might be something they want to do there with you. And it will also, if they're not ready, if the solution, if the conclusion is they're not ready to make any changes, great. They know they can come back and see you because you are non-judgmental. You're not forcing change upon them. And they know that there are some online tools to help them in between the time you see them again. Another choice might be my favorite choice, which is take a short break from chems. So abstinence forever might be a giant, frightening, overwhelming goal for a gay man in a big city whose whole life has been socializing with drugs, whose sex life has been enjoying sex with drugs and intimacy with drugs. Abstinence might be too big. They might have given them the harm reduction information. Maybe he has reflected on the role drugs are playing in his life. Maybe he's ready to make changes. And what does that mean? Maybe it just means taking a short break from chems. Nothing too scary. So the next page would invite them to choose a goal. Maybe he chooses 3 months. The next question would be how confident he is to achieve the 3-month goal. Now, if he is using every 7 days, if he's using every single weekend, 3 months is a very big goal. He might not feel very confident about it. Might be 3 out of 10 confident. So it would just suggest that that's too big a goal. Perhaps choosing something smaller, like 7 days, would be more achievable. We want our patients to come back a success after 7 days, rather than a failure after 3 months. That's the essence of working with people who use drugs, sort of motivational work. So it will invite them to choose a smaller goal, 7 days. It will ask the same question, how confident they are, and likely they will be more confident to achieve it now. It will then ask how important it is for them to achieve this goal. For some people, it's not very important at all. Maybe they're only sitting there because their nurse told them to do something, or their boyfriend told them they had a problem, or their doctor said, you need to stop doing drugs. And it's not important to them. And the next page will say, cool, go away. Come back when you're ready. This only works if it's important to you. It's not a trick question, but it kind of makes a person reflect on, oh, I'm talking about it and I'm saying out loud, I don't want to do anything about this. So it's kind of a motivational tool to motivate someone to make, it's classic motivational interviewing. And it would take them back to those reflective questions so they can reflect some more, perhaps. But perhaps it is important to make changes. Maybe 9 out of 10 important. The next thing that will happen is that they will say, right, we have a plan for 7 days. There are things that will happen within the next 7 days that cause cravings. So do you feel cravings on Tuesday mornings on your way to work? No? Okay. Do you feel your cravings to use drugs, an overwhelming urge to use drugs on Thursday when you're having lunch with your colleagues? No? Okay. Do you have a craving or an urge to use drugs on Friday night when you're home alone and all your friends are out partying? Oh yes? Oh, I see. So this is just helping a person identify the most vulnerable moments within the next 7 days where they might be overcome with cravings and urges, so that they can do something different, be prepared for them, and maybe put something in place like call a friend or keep themselves occupied with going to the movies or doing other things during those times. And the next thing will happen is there are triggers, there are things that set us off. Sometimes an argument with my mother makes me want to use drugs. Sometimes, I'm somebody seriously nodding over here, hello, I get you, failure. Sometimes it's when my boyfriend has shagged someone else, that's when I go out and self-destruct and do a whole lot of drugs. It's recognizing the triggers that make us, excuse me, that make us want to use. Then if you know what they are, you can anticipate them, prepare for them, and be prepared. There'll be some other questions about the role other drugs or alcohol might play. Ecstasy or alcohol might not be considered chemsex drugs, but they might play a role in weakening our resolve to not use drugs in the next 7 days. So it's about being prepared for those two. And cravings will happen. In the next 7 days, cravings are going to happen. What our patient can do, or the person sitting in front of us, they can choose. There are things we can do when a craving happens. We are not a victim when a craving happens. Oh, I felt a craving and I had no control whatsoever. There are things we can do. We can get better each week at learning how to recognize when we are having a craving. There are things we can put in place to resolve it differently. A craving is not a thought process that we can think our way out of. It's an emotional state we get in. So learning to manage our emotional state is something we get better at over time, and our patient can choose or tick some boxes that he thinks he can do to help himself when a craving comes along. And that's it. We have a care plan. So in the last 10 minutes, sitting with your patient, you have helped your patient choose a goal that he feels confident he can achieve. He's told you that it's important to him to achieve this. That was an amazing moment. He's told you, you've identified the most vulnerable times in the next 7 days that he will use and put some things in place. You have identified some triggers that will cause cravings, and he has ticked some boxes of how to manage cravings differently when they happen. This is not perfect therapy, it is not rocket science, but in 15 minutes he now has a plan of how to spend the next 7 days differently that you have supported him with, even though you've had no chemsex training at all. It's just an online tool that is not making any money. It is not collecting data when people put it in. It is just a tool made by an activist for my gay brothers out there, and it's being translated into 11 languages for you. Spanish is already up, English is up, German is up, Greek is up. But this is, again, I just want to stress, it's not making any money, it's not branded, it's not collecting any data. It's purely a tool to help my clinician family around the world and my gay brothers out there who need to make changes around chemsex. And I've been told that's enough time. That's okay with me. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for this fantastic presentation. Now, I'd like to thank the organizers for having set up this conference, especially Kike Poveda for having worked so very hard. He's done a very thorough job. I think he's exhausted, but it's been worth it, and I'd certainly like to thank him personally. And I'd like for us to take the opportunity now to all reflect as members of the LGBTQ community on our use of drugs, on our sexuality, on the information that we have about new strategies or old strategies, how we fuck, how we take drugs, what answers we're providing from the community, and what responsibilities we are asking those who are governing us to provide for all of our needs. It's great, it's perfect that someone hangs gay pride banners all over Madrid. That makes us feel happy, proud, and like everything has been achieved. But no, let's go a little further. I think we need to ask for more from our politicians and those who are in positions of power. They really have to be respectful and take care of the LGBTQ community. It's not just about hanging flags out. We've got to be respectful, and we've got to ask them to be very careful about protecting our rights to health. We really deserve them. And we're living in a time where fear has disappeared, thank goodness. We're always hearing that we've lost our fear of AIDS, of death. Sex no longer means that we can die. Great. I'm so happy. I'm very, very happy not to be afraid about sex. And I'm very happy that young people today don't connotate sex with fear. I think we need to congratulate ourselves on that, but that's not enough. We need other interventions, and they can't always be alluding to the fact that people have become more relaxed in their customs. They're no longer afraid of AIDS. They're no longer afraid of sexually transmitted diseases. I think there are other components that we have to look at, and we have other things we need to demand. Fear can help the population react at times when it faces epidemics. But fear can be very unreasonable, and we have other mechanisms, sex education, sexually transmitted disease information centers, and case studies. All of this will help us to have less fear and to see the needs that the LGBTQ community has and what the politicians and our governments need to listen to and listen for. These are ideas, a few ideas that perhaps would be more effective than fear, because the worst time in the history of AIDS, when our friends were dying, people were really afraid, but we kept on getting infected. Fear didn't really stop the epidemic. It didn't work then, and it's not going to work now because, well, we don't even have fear any longer. So my presentation is going to be about a reflection on new strategies for prevention and how each of our organizations, from individual activism, we can start to require ourselves to change our language and to, above all, give out information. There's a big lack of information. There's a lack of information from decision makers, from the heads of LGBTQ organizations, from HIV and AIDS organizations. When David said that one of the things we need to manage today, gay men, there are many new different ways of for prevention, and we've got to manage the absolute ignorance about the different ways that we can prevent not just prevent AIDS and HIV, but other sexually transmitted diseases. We're living a sexual revolution like we did back in the 1970s, and back when women fought to gain access to the birth control pills and have free sex, free love, and they were treated like total libertines or whores. And now gay men are experiencing something similar when we talk about our sexual rights, and we demand to be protected against HIV. We're treated like whores. People are saying, what do we want? We just want to screw like rabbits and just enjoy our bodies? Well, yeah, we do. We do. And we also believe that besides having a gay pride flag hanging out of the window or off the balcony of the City Hall of Madrid, we want to have recognition from the authorities of our sexuality. We're different, and we don't want to have all the 4,000 different HIV infections we're seeing every year in Spain. And we don't want a government that is not at our service. Prevention has changed a lot. We've come from the era of condoms, when that was the only thing that we had, and there was the big Spanish campaign for condom use. It's sort of like people seem to miss it now, and it was put it on yourself, put it on your partner. That seemed to be a way of controlling the epidemic completely, but no. That campaign didn't completely stop infections. If it had, I would not be here. I was infected during the time of that campaign, and I'm sure many of you were too. On the other hand, I do think that now we have a change of paradigm. Fortunately, prevention with antiretrovirals has now become part of a big benefit of for HIV prevention, from mother to child, the vertical, and we saw that the antiretrovirals allowed us not to carry down that infection to the child, and children were not born with HIV necessarily. Children could be born without it, and this proved the idea that these drugs really did work well to avoid infection of HIV infection. And that paradigm today is going over to new forms, and it has a whole social transformation around it. There's an enormous use of condoms. The reasons, well, there's been a decline in the use of condoms. People don't want to use them any longer. They're not so informed as they might have been. Everybody has their own special circumstances and reasons for not using condoms, but they're not being used as often as before, and we can't put a gun to people's heads to get them to use them. That's impossible. We've got a reality where they're used less and less often, and we have to see how we're going to deal with that. Years ago, unfortunately, there wasn't as much sexual freedom among the gay community And we didn't see this explosion that we see in the gay community now of sex. People have really come out of the closets. And so we've got, together with the appearance of new substances, as David said, and together with the change in social perceptions about HIV not being a mortal disease any longer, this is giving us new ways, it has to give us new ways to face the epidemic and to slow down the infection of people, especially gay men. When we talk about protection with antiretrovirals, we're talking basically about protection as with post-exposition prophylaxis and pre-exposition or pre-exposure prophylaxis, and with the aim of using drugs to get rid of the infection, and as Los Angeles says, to fuck without fear. And I think we should all congratulate ourselves on this more and more. When we talk about prevention strategies, are they really prevention strategies? Some of them aren't so new. Treatment as prevention. This is 2008 here, and back then, Dr. Bernatza and the Swiss court made a declaration where they said, without a doubt, that in the patients they followed, they had found no transmission of HIV, and those persons who, with an undetected viral load of more than 6 months, they saw any infection without condoms. And that was caused a lot of controversy immediately, and the scientific community and the sanitary experts got alarmed and said, this is going to be terrible. People will start getting infected if condoms are not used. And after that controversy, everything was done, even by many NGOs, in trying to negate the evidence, because they said we would destroy the language of prevention that we had been using since the 1980s, and we would lose all the ground that we had gained for use of condoms, and we were not doing each other much of a favor. Years went by, and the HPTN 052 confirmed in a clinical trial what we had seen through a Swiss study. And Partner in 2016 reconfirms that someone with HIV and undetected for more than 6 months' time was not transmitting HIV to his partner when he didn't use a condom. The scientific proof is there, or evidence is there, and Dr. Bernatza recently in the Swiss Medical Weekly shows again the findings with all the accrued scientific data. We see that there's not an infection, and we have a series of facts. Infections do not occur, and even if there is a sexually transmitted infection in a person who is HIV positive with a detectable load, we see that there is no HIV transmission. This was one of the doubts we had. Well, if there's a sexually transmitted disease, there could be another increase in the viral load, but we didn't see any negative effects in this way. But despite all of that, the health authorities, some scientific communities not all, but some have been reticent to consider that sex without a condom be considered a valid option. And when we go down to physician level, and forget about the scientific community, when we get down to doctors, this is anathema. Then you can see behind the doctor's office, you can see all the children who have been born by those couples who were not using condoms, and they did not have any infection. So I said, well, so I can screw without a condom? But the doctor says, no, you have to use a condom. And then why? Then who are these people? These beautiful children who have been born naturally. Why are you telling me I've got to use a condom? I think this is something that from NGOs, we need to start giving out information, clear information to our users, and to demand that the scientific communities change their discourse, because in Switzerland, where they have done this, thanks to the declaration, there has been no more criminalization because of exposure to HIV, and they're no longer washing semen or and having to do artificial insemination, and the empowerment of clinics and persons has gone with HIV has gone in parallel to what the scientific community is now saying. And there's a controversy that's also endorsed by the International Society of AIDS that says that indetectable means intransmissible. How many organizations here today representing civil society have signed that declaration where we commit as organizations that our messages will be absolutely clear about that? Mine has also. Very few. Cogam also, good. So this means we need to make an effort as a community where these messages, which I think would destigmatize, and they offer proof, we need to take them on as our own and demand that scientific communities in Spain, like Hispanocida, revise their policies and adapt them to realities and stop using ductile language such as practically impossible, residual, etc. And they really pay attention to evidence and get clearer and have messages that are clearer and more direct. And treatment is prevention. Well, in some cases, the health authorities have used this to slow down other things like PrEP, with the false premise that if we test everyone, we treat everyone, then the HIV will drop because new infections will drop on their own. But of course, that's got some barriers that are quite large, and the health authorities don't want to spend any more money in PrEP, nor they're not going to say that that's the solution. And the late diagnosis in Spain is 73% of cases, 63% of cases. And in drug users, 60%. In women, 54%. And men who have sex with other men, 38.4%. So we would have to make a lot of improvement in our early diagnosis if we want this strategy to be a solution on its own in our country. And only a fraction of the total population diagnosed has been detected as having HIV. This requires coordinated policies if we want to have early diagnosis. And look, Montaner in British Columbia tried to make strategy the answer to the HIV problem, and without seeing the number of persons tested and treated grew too much, he never was able to keep the new infections between men go down a good important degree. So let's do something different in Spain. And there's a big lack of information. We have to get empowered, and it has to be us, the NGOs, who start to demand that stigma fall to the wayside. Information coming from treatment as prevention is necessary. And then we've got post-exposition prophylaxis. This is not going to be the big solution to new infections that occur in Spain. This is something residual. Furthermore, the difficulties that already exist with the strategy, because we don't know the serology of the individual, it's a little theoretical. There's no clinical proof. They're big barriers. There's not much of a margin of time for application. The protocols are not well known by the hospital personnel, and small hospitals really don't know what post-exposure prophylaxis are. And the general population doesn't. The NGOs here have not given out much information. We have not worked with the hospitals, and it's very difficult in the small hospitals, especially, as I said earlier. So what's the new strategy that can help us try to contain the epidemic that we're having right now in Spain? Because I want to remind you that we're talking about 4,000 infections every year. Every day, 10 persons are contracting HIV in Spain. 10 today, 10 tomorrow, 10 the next day. And this is all occurring when finally we have mechanisms to avoid this. We've been saying we need a vaccine. We need something to protect us against HIV. We've got prophylaxis. We have oral vaccines that you can take. And we're losing opportunity thinking about things that are not strictly HIV. And we're talking about sexually transmitted diseases. We're talking about many other things, and we've really forgotten why we are here. It's because of HIV infections. Effectiveness is highly proven. In some cases, it reaches 94%, depending. It can even be higher. Here you've got a summary of all the different trials we've had with PrEP, and its effectiveness. Today, no one questions any longer whether or not they are effective or not. No one. What is the situation, the terrific situation in Spain? We see that infections keep increasing. The level does not go down, and of those persons that the European Union classifies as 80 persons who are infected every day in the European Union, 10 of them are Spanish. And vis-a-vis this, we find that there is no access in Spain, and the delay is unjustified. The government has no plans for implementation. There's no type of negotiation with pharmaceutical companies for this to come into our health care plan. It's not considered a health priority. And we can't go to the ministry and say, our community, we have to go and say that we're being infected, but nobody's doing that. Nobody is knocking on the ministry's door saying this is not sustainable. Just one platform that has organized itself has SIDA because of our enormous anger, and scientific communities are frustrated because recommendations, what they are working for and what they see is not something taken seriously by the ministry. And look, for us to look at a timeline, HESIDA publishes its recommendations in July 2016 and approved, thinking things are going to be approved, and since they're going to be approved, we'll make a study about the recommendations for implementation in Spain and what groups have to be targeted, how things will be done, etc., etc. What a scientific community should actually do to prepare for something that's coming. And this was approved in August of last year. Okay, it's approved. Let's go forward. Let's implement. We've got the recommendations in place. But look, the ministry comes out with the great idea of saying that they need more evidence of effectiveness and more of an understanding about how PrEP will be implemented. Well, they say they need more proof, more evidence. And this is just bargaining for time. And we've got a trial with 400 people. We're a big country, and 400 people are not going to solve any problems. And this is a 2-year trial study. And not only that, this study, which is totally unnecessary, it hasn't started yet, nor does it have a starting date. So everything has been stopped. And price negotiation for including this in the national health system doesn't have a date either. No one knows, no one says anything, no one feels responsible, no one is asked to take responsibility. And today I would like to say that individually and collectively, we here need to leave today with our ideas clear and with clear goals, which is to show our anger to the ministry. Because as a community, we have to tell them what they're doing wrong and what we want to see change. If we don't do that now, we will just conform to the and go on with the banners that are hung from the city hall's balcony and say everything is great. Wow. No, equality in rights is health equality, and the gays platform, Gays Against HIV, we will be in Seville Wednesday at 11 a.m. in front of the ministry. We will have an take action. We've called the press, and we're going to protest against the no access to PrEP in Spain. And from here, I ask you and I urge you to mobilize yourselves as citizens, as gays, as members of our community. I want you to go to that demonstration. Support it from your spaces, from your positions of power, from your positions of communication. Do something. Otherwise, I don't think we'll achieve anything. And lastly, as an end, I wanted to put out the last campaign of my organization, Alada. What we're trying to do is get people to know that in addition to condoms, there are other ways of protecting oneself against HIV. Let's continue with our dialogues. Thank you very much.
Sí, me piden que...
It's tomorrow at Wednesday, 11 a.m. in front of the ministry. We will be demonstrating, asking them to undo the freeze on PrEPs in Spain.
Bueno, enhorabuena por las dos charlas, sinceramente magníficas. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your. Bueno, yo creo que hay muchos temas que se pueden debatir. Preguntas. ¿Alguien tiene algún comentario, alguna pregunta que hacer a los ponentes?
We can't translate. She doesn't have a mic. She doesn't have a microphone.
I'm really happy and grateful for this presentation because I think that HIV issues, especially HIV-related stigma and chemsex, is something which is not at all addressed in our LGBTQI communities. And I'm a co-chair of IGLIO, which is International LGBTQI Youth and Student Organization, which is a network of more than 93 member organizations in Europe. And we still don't have any position paper, any document or advocacy tool that we can use to advocate for and talk about HIV-related stigma and chemsex. And I've been trying to raise that issue for a year now, ever since I joined the board of IGLIO and became the co-chair. And the argument that I hear most of the time is that we have to have the approval of all of our 95 member organizations on every issue that we want to tackle, which is, in my opinion, and a little bit a subtle way to say, no, we don't want to tackle this because of the stigma, because our communities have been related to HIV epidemic in the past. And I really think it has to stop because, not just because that the people that I love the most in this world are affected by the issue, but also because we as a community cannot anymore exclude part of our own communities. It just has to stop. So I'm really grateful for being here, and everything that I can learn and hear, I will use it in the best way that I can. I cannot promise that I will do a lot of things, apart from the gathering information from our member organization, opening discussion at our annual members conference, which will happen in 2 months, and will gather more than 70 people. But I really think that as much as we can gather and share and talk, it is so, so, so important, so thank you very much.
Muy bien, gracias. Julio, si nos importa, si pudierais identificar...
If you don't mind, if you could identify yourselves. Thank you, Vincent. I am Julia del Amo, and I work in the National Center of Epidemics. I want to join this lady, and I want to thank you and say that I completely agree with everything you've said. And also the patent of Truvada, you know, where are we at in terms of our talks to the ministry? Within this context, it is very important to put this demand on the table. And you have mentioned, Diego, the contraception pill in women. And at this moment in Spain, people pay for it privately because those financed within the national health system don't cover the whole range. So I want to introduce this co-payment subject. I'm not talking about the one that can't be assumed by certain people, because we all know that some things can't be afforded by anybody. So for all the minority groups that are vulnerable, for example, sex workers and so on, there's a huge proportion of gay men with a high wealth. And I know this subject is not easy, but we are talking about, you know, these people that we can talk about everything. So I just wanted to make these 2 comments. So the community has been addressing this company, asking for a different price of Truvada as a treatment or as prevention system. And this company is not willing to establish this difference in prices, whether it's treatment or prevention. And they have told us, we've heard with the people in the United States. As for the patent, we know that Gilead, the name of this company, is they're not willing to make it accessible. Truvada, I'm talking about this drug, and for example, in London, I don't know the legal term for this, they have applied for an extension of the patent in order to avoid that the generic drug can enter the market as a prescription for prevention. So we are hoping that this is going to, between July and August, the court in London is going to deal with this and actually establish whether Truvada what's going to happen with the patent. So what is going to be the situation? From the community is clear, it's an needed strategy. And we are surprised that even though other strategies, I mean, as well as other strategies, urgent ones have been negotiated, like hepatitis C treatments, and we have managed to get that. So we need to reach an agreement. You know, some of these negotiations are very obscure, but if we have reached an agreement, why can't we do it now when we talk about HIV infections, which is also a social emergency? Perhaps we don't have the same impact with the media or in the street, because perhaps in that case the government would have established strategies, negotiation strategies with a patent laboratory, and they would have actually offered a significant reduction in the price. We don't know because this hasn't happened, so we don't know how far it would have got. So the laboratory is not actually enabling this matter, and neither the government. Did I make it very difficult? So I think the hot potato is in the government, not in the laboratory, although they also have their part, their responsibility. As for the pill, we should demand that they should be included in the national health system. So why women have been removed a right that should be included? So why do we have to ask that the rest of groups are also minority groups are also losing rights? So is this about assuming increasingly in a subliminal manner that the loss of rights is something natural along with the co-payment? Do you know what I mean? I'm really amazed how we are actually integrating this, assuming this. So we are paying with our tax a lot. So perhaps what we should demand is a better management of our taxes. So the lady who had free pill at the time, in the old days, and nowadays they have to pay for it. I don't think it's something that we should be proud of. No, we should actually say, look, sexual health is very important, and reproductive health is so important that it should be funded. And we shouldn't find these huge differences within health, because we could say that the OMS is actually, we would say that actually invented this right, that health is something inherent in human beings. Why do we have to pay for this? I think this is something very clear. This drug has to be approved. But would you accept the co-payment? To share the payment? Why don't you answer this? Personally, I think the debate is not about the co-payment. The only one we know about is the one in Belgium, which is on the current price of Truvada, which is 11 euros. But the people who actually buy this drug regularly, they are paying much more, over 100 euros per bottle. This is not the question. We have to debate, as Diego said, that this process has to be speeded up so that we have a route map. We don't have anything right now. This can't be implemented overnight without considering an economic pact. with the national health. You know, we need those services. So I think this answer is about the legal pressure that the Spanish organizations and associations have actually managed to exercise on the government. Indeed, I think there's very little interest from the national health to face this problem in a brave way. We have to tackle this problem. What I mean is, oh, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Well, changing the topic, I want to give the floor to David. What is the situation in London? Can people have access to PrEP easily? And the question I wanted to ask is that Truvada is a drug that is actually given in hospitals in Spain only.
In England, healthcare is free for everybody. That's just how it works, including the pill, which is free for everybody. PrEP, that is not the case yet either, so it's exactly the same thing. We, in regard to your co-payment remark, in England, we have been, in my clinic, we have been diagnosing between 6 and 650. It's about 650 gay men with HIV every year for the last 10 years, and it's been increasing by 10%. Last year, a whole lot of people started taking PrEP and paying for it themselves, buying it internationally, so not paying the full price, but in regard to like co-payment prices. And our infections reduced to 300 last year. It's an amazing accomplishment. It wasn't accomplished just with PrEP, but it demonstrates that co-payment could work because people, the people who can afford to buy those prices, it was effective in reducing our infections. It completely ignores the needs of the people who can't afford that or don't have the awareness to pursue those methods. But I would have to say too that it's not just PrEP. What London did remarkably was PrEP is great, but it's no good unless someone comes to clinic to learn about it. Hearing about it in the newspapers and Googling something but never getting around to ordering it is no point unless you've got a friendly nurse when you come for PEP that explains to you and holds your hand through the process of ordering it online and paying and helping you do it and all of those questions that get involved. And also having services where we say, come and talk to us about gay sex, not services to say, come to us when something goes wrong, come to us when you have an infection, come to us when your world falls apart. No, our services come to us to talk about gay sex anyway, which is what 5016 Street does, and when they are here, we talk to them about PrEP. PrEP is no good unless we have those conversations with them, because it's not in the media, as you say. That's the situation in London.
Gracias.
Thank you. And Diego, I totally agree with you that we don't have to lose more rights, that we are already paying a lot. So the question or the comment I made about co-payment, and it's small, I'm talking about those small figures that Ferran mentioned, little money. It's because we need to counter-argument and to try to deepen and use this tool. I mean, I know that we're not really, the issue is not the co-payment. We talk, the issue is something else. What for me is not clear is an open reflection. I see arguments for and against. I would like to be able to talk about everything without barriers. And if the co-payment is 11 euros, okay, let's do that, but have PrEP on the table. For me, it's not clear. I want to open this question in this forum because here I feel I can. In other fora, I wouldn't talk about co-payment. We need to put everything on the table and put as much pressure as possible and not to leave any easy counter-argument. We need an answer, a clear answer. facing the economic elements that are clearly there. The resources are not infinite, and we need to be able to have a reflection on the economics of health. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what my position is. This is why I wanted to reflect on it. I don't know, Diego, if you would like to answer this question. Thank you. I am Iago from Médecins du Monde, or Doctors of the World, and I want to make a few comments. The first one is, in how many countries in the European Union is it possible to get PrEPs? And is there an estimation as the impact in Spain? And thirdly, you've just mentioned the people, particularly HSH in Spain, that they are already in PrEP and they can find it through alternative ways. So I wanted to ask you whether you have any comment, any advice, because what I have heard, I've seen all kinds of things, people who are using them properly, but some of the cases where, so if they use them as in, okay, I'm going to take risks, so I take a pill, and so on, and that's it. So European countries that they have implemented is Scotland, Norway, Belgium, France, I believe Holland, Luxembourg, England. I don't think it has been approved. It has an implementation study of 10,000 people. Has it started? And recently, the Portuguese government has announced they're going to implement it as well. I imagine they are in the process. They've said they're going to implement it. So in Europe, increasingly, are more and more countries adopting it because it's clear, the evidence is clear. And we can deny it is effective to prevent HIV infections. Well, if we want to talk about STIs, something is different, but we are talking about HIV. I've been asked about people who get PrEPs via alternative ways. As always, the community gets organized the best they can. When something is not available and there's no regulation, people find ways. Some of them organize themselves in a more regulated way. There are pages such as I Want PrEP Now. There's a web page. I think Jim Phillips organizes this page based in the Canary Islands, and he gives information about how to get it in the UK that comes from India, PrEP that comes from India and is good quality. Also, we are giving counseling to people who are using PrEP to avoid precisely everything that you are saying, that somebody who takes them on and off. So the idea is if you're using this, use it properly. If you want to take them daily, get in contact with us so that you have a doctor who's going to monitor your kidneys and HIV test just to check that everything is working well. So you see, in the community, some of us are getting organized, but in general, the answer in Spain is very poor. Associations giving this service is not very many. There's BCA Checkpoint in Barcelona, there's us in Madrid. I don't really know how many other associations are actually giving this service. What we have decided to do is do the best we can just to face what's happening in the streets, because you always have two options. Give an answer to everything that's actually happening in the street so that it doesn't get to be serious or significant, or cross your arms. So some of us are not willing to do that, to cross our arms and do nothing about it.
Just wanted to answer on the co-payment it's debate that we had in France before the authorization and reimbursement of PrEP. So now it's totally reimbursed in France, like in other countries, I think now in Europe. Yeah, I think it's a very bad idea to come on that ground when we talk to the authorities. Because they just want that, like argument not to pay too much for us. So when we had this debate, we decided to go frankly and say we want free PrEP now, and we created direct action groups of gay men, positive or negative, and trans people also, and we did some actions. We did graffiti in the streets, in the gay areas, in front of the ministry, like maybe it will be done tomorrow. And so we did a lot of tension against the ministry. And just before the 1st of December, and it has worked, because the 1st of December, the ministry said, okay, free PrEP in January. No, it was a year ago, a bit more, 2 years ago now. Yeah. Yeah, because doing co-payment, it will always do two speeds prevention, and okay for white gay male, it's okay when they have a work, but we have to think of the other marginalized communities like trans people, racialized people, migrants, sex workers, and yeah, for them co-payments will never work. So yeah, we have to think globally and also of the margins, not only the gay, inserted socially.
Okay. ¿Tienes algún comentario a esa? Bueno, si no. Wait a minute, because there is a man who asked before. El hombre de la izquierda está primero. Bueno.
Fuck without fear. I'm on board with PrEP. I celebrate it as a great advancement. My concerns are that it's not for everybody. And my other concern is that people who celebrate PrEP with a statement like fuck without, I'm all for crafting a great message for it. But fuck without fear, I think, young people today know that we live in a world that's nothing but full of fear. And I think people understand that there are consequences to sex that may not be lethal, but that they might not want to fuck around with. I absolutely believe that PrEP can save lives. Save lives, and because people still do die of HIV, whether we like it or not. But the two things that bother me is, in the States, most of the most vocal PrEP activists say, well, the most famous AIDS activist in the United States, goes around saying, well, everybody knows that safe sex never worked. What? You don't want the message to undermine the people who wanted you to have sex with condoms, because those people are keeping PrEP people's chances of encountering an STI way down. We have 310 million people in America, and we have 40,000 cases of new cases of HIV every year. That's a lot of safe sex, or it's a lot of people having a lot less sex. Sex is definitely one of life's greatest joys, but I don't think one message there's something about the pro-PrEP message that is like so angry or fed up with condoms. Believe me, we all have been fed up with condoms. But you don't want to undermine those people who are fine with safe sex and using condoms, and there's a lot of them. 40,000 cases out of 310 million people in America in a country that's so fucked up about sexuality is pretty miraculous to me. I don't know what the numbers are in Europe. So I don't think attacking safe sex or dismissing it is helpful to your cause. I don't. The last second brief thing, really quickly, they're having studies coming out showing that people came in on PrEP, their incident of syphilis has gone up like 200%. What? There's ones, you know, I can't start quoting studies, but this is the ones that people send me. What were you saying? Okay. So, I mean, there are consequences. Just own them. Just say, you know, we really want to bring an end to the HIV epidemic. You know, but don't say fuck without, I'm sorry. Fuck without fear, it just rubs me the wrong way. I think there's got to be a coming together of people who are fine with safe sex and can't imagine being sexually active without it, and who see using a condom as the ultimate act of intimacy, because you're willing to sacrifice some pleasure to be with this person in a way that you wouldn't be with them because of, I mean, forgive me, but I'm not trying to start a war. I am on your side, but I don't understand why your side has to antagonize.
Diego, un momento, un interesante punto de vista, pero solamente tenemos tiempo para un comentario.
We only have time for one comment and one brief comment, okay?
Treatment group. I want to go back to what Julia was saying about co-payments. I think in the advocacy field for co-payments for PrEP, it's dangerous. We have young people living in Central Europe, Eastern Europe and beyond who can't afford a condom. How can they afford to buy a drug? So I think to start advocating for co-payment and saying that's an acceptable form of accessing PrEP is wrong. Coming back to the increase of STI rates with people using PrEP, it's wrong. There's an increase in testing of STI rates, and these are people that didn't engage in services before. So we will see an increase in STI infections. It's a false reading. All it means is we are screening more people who didn't come into care before. So there will be a plateau. Sorry? No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You said there's been. You said that people have taken PrEP, that they've spiked in a syphilis infection. Okay. What's happening is those people are being screened. They were not being screened before. So you're seeing an increase. Okay. Within a year, 18 months, we will see a plateau. New people will be tested more regularly, which brings me on to how PrEP should be prescribed, not through the internet. If we are prescribing or if we are allowing people to purchase this on the internet, who is regulating the drug? Where are the fake websites going to start to appear? We've already seen this happen in Russia. Somebody ordered Truvada and it was fake. If PrEP is being prescribed properly, people should be monitored, they should be screened regularly for STI infections, and they should be renal monitored and everything else that goes with it.
Un último comentario de Michael, y si os parece cerramos.
Yes, I wanted to ask, I was thinking about asking something to David, but now you mentioned the thing of fear. I think the word would be anxiety. I mean, fuck without anxiety. That would be one of the things, because one of the support groups we have in Barcelona is for chemsex, is seeing that some of the guys bought PrEP, or mine in this case, but then they took away a part of their anxiety, and this anxiety to have been born in an era of AIDS and HIV, and always have this anxiety of acquiring HIV, makes sometimes people just go into drugs just to forget that. So I was wondering if you have seen something also in Dean Street about the relation of use of PrEP and the diminishing of the use of chemsex.
Go with the fuck without fear posters. They don't bother me that much. But I'm just saying, don't alienate other people in the community that could be your allies by saying things like, you know, by implying that, you know, messages coming from too many PrEP people undermine safe sex. And I think that's going to be the undoing of it. And I think there's got to be a way to bridge support so that we're all in this together as opposed to
Chris, let me finish with your comment very briefly. Safe sex nowadays means different things that safe sex meant in your time. That's it.
A gay man dies in London every 12 days from a GBL overdose. I travel the world to talk about chemsex because I don't want it to get as bad in other cities as it has. And everywhere I go, everyone wants to talk more about PrEP. That's fine, because PrEP is important. My brothers are dying. Every 12 days, another guy dies from GBL. I travel the world asking for brotherhood, asking for kindness, and ask for a little activism, and I just see gay men tear each other apart over PrEP. It's really fucking boring. But I know that we all, I'll remind myself at least everyone in this room is arguing about the same thing. We want our brothers to be well, we want everyone to get free healthcare, we want everyone to be protected from HIV, we want everyone to have all the tools to manage safer STIs. And in the middle of all of this confusion, remember that a whole lot of us are dying from drugs or really suffering from drugs, and it's become a phenomenal epidemic that kind of gets lost as we enjoy the argument about PrEP a little bit. That's a little bit me just getting a little angry, and I'm sorry I did, because somebody did die just a little while ago. I'll stop now. I can't answer your question, I'm sorry.
Muy bien, gracias amigos. Yo creo que vamos a terminar con esto. Quería felicitar a los ponentes, felicitar a la audiencia.
Okay, we're going to finish. I wanted to thank the audience and the speakers. Everybody, thank you very much.